Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with Nancy Triggiani-Musco, and we're going to talk about her research, her family, and her getting Italian citizenship. So welcome, Nancy. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And as I said before, my first interview since coming back from the beautiful country of Italy.
Oh, welcome back.
So I want to talk about, your journey to getting Italian citizenship. But before we do that, I'd like to talk about your research, which I believe actually led to you getting your citizenship. Yeah?
That's correct. For some reason, it was born in me to have this passion for genealogy. And I clearly remember being a little girl, I don't know, maybe 7 years old, sitting before my Italian immigrant grandmother saying, "Grandma, tell me more stories about Italy." And she had this white rocking chair she'd be rocking in, and I'd stand in front of her just eager for all this information. And she would tell me, about different things about the family history, and I could never get enough of it. And as I got older, maybe into my late teens, uh, early 20s, I really had a passion for this. And one of my uncles was equally as impassioned, and he was a retired CPA, but he just loved everything about the family history. And he did a lot of research, but that was probably back in the 1990s, late 1990s. And back then, the information that was available online was limited as compared to what we have access today. So whatever he did get, he would make photocopies of and send them to me. So with those papers combined with what I was finding from my own research, I created a binder of everything. And I, had it all categorized and laid out neatly. And then one day, around in 2015, I would say, yes, 2015. And this is really important for people who are seeking Italian citizenship. But before I say that, let me just add, I always made an assumption, which is what I want to caution all listeners about. Don't make assumptions that you are or are not eligible for Italian citizenship. Yeah. For some reason, I don't know why, I just made an assumption I was not eligible because I assumed my grandfather had naturalized as a U.S. citizen prior to the birth of his son, my father, which would cut off my eligibility. I made that assumption. So one day, while just casually going like this and flipping through the pages of the binder, all of a sudden I looked at this tiny document that I had seen a million times before, but never examined. And that was a U.S. Census report. And on that census report, which I never realized before, as well, it lists not only my grandfather and his children, my grandmother, their ages, but their citizenship. And there it was, alien. And my father was already too. And I froze. I'm like, because I knew the Italian citizenship law. I'm like, oh my God, I'm eligible. And that was the catalyst. That just started the whole ball rolling. And having said that, for people who are having difficulty ascertaining whether or not their ancestor through whom they are eligible, or they think they might be eligible, was naturalized or not, and they can't find naturalization papers, big clue, look at the census reports because it will tell the status of their citizenship. And that's something I failed to do for all these years. I could have been an Italian citizen years ago, but it was that great revelation from my genealogy binder.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And to your point, a lot of people don't focus in on that. I mean, I didn't realize that until just a little while ago that it had that. And then in my case, the same thing. My dad was born in 1923, and my grandfather naturalized in 36. So, of course, I'm eligible. And my grandmother actually, he was the only one who naturalized. My mother's parents never naturalized, and my father's mother never naturalized. And I think my grandfather probably did it because he had a business. And that's the only thing I could think is that for some business reason, he felt he needed to be, an American citizen.
Right.
And my grandmother, my father's mother, spoke very little English.
Hmm.
My grandfather, I didn't. He passed away when I was like 2 months old, so I never really knew him.
Aw.
But yeah, that's a good fact. They don't assume anything. And then a lot of people are also confused about the whole 1948 rule. With the mother's side.
Right.
And it was just explained. That was just explained to me a little while ago. And I would be eligible through my mother,
Okay.
but my brother wouldn't because he was born in '46.
Oh, oh no.
But we have so many connect. I mean, we wouldn't have a problem in any event. So that's not a big deal. So I like I'm one of these people obsessed with genealogy, and there's one or two of us in every family, and it seems like one or two in every generation. It's weird.
Right.
And nobody else gets it. And I'm of the opinion that I don't know if it's ingrained in us or somebody's poking us in the shoulder saying, you need to do this.
Yeah, it's funny when you said that, because my grandfather, through whom I did get my citizenship, it's on my paternal line, and he passed away when I was only just turning 5 years old. But for some reason, my entire life had this bond with him. He was a barber by profession, as many of the immigrants were. He was also a guitarist, by the way. And so I actually got his barber scissors that I still use to this day. And I inherited some of his other personal items. And I've always just cherished every single thing about him. And I do think that he's my guardian angel. He's been watching over me. And like you said, to your words, he poked me in the shoulder, and he's been doing that my whole life.
Yeah. And nothing happens by coincidence.
I agree.
Just, for example, we had to postpone this trip for 2.5 years. I guess it's about 4 months ago now. I got a message from Facebook from Nicola DiPaolo, who is my grandmother's grandson through a second marriage.
Okay.
So actually my great-grandfather, his grandfather, but there's a generation gap because my great-grandfather was 60 and he married a woman 30.
Oh, wow.
So he had children that were my father's age. And I knew his nephew, but I was never able to kind of connect all of this stuff. Anyway, we're going there, and he says, well, I'm going to come and meet you, and we're going to do all this stuff. Well, he takes us to my grandmother's brother's daughters. They were both in their 90s. And we're going up the stairs, and he says, just wait a minute, And he goes upstairs, and he's talking to them in Italian, and they open up the door. One of them, it looked like my grandmother. I mean, not a spitting image, but looked like her. Well, these two women attack us, right? Hugging and kissing. And then they start pulling out pictures. And they had the photo of my mother and father's wedding that my grandmother sent, written in Italian, sent to them in 1944. I never knew these people existed.
Wow.
And had we not delayed the trip, never would have known.
Right.
We never would have met them, never would have known any of this stuff. So the moral of the story, I guess, is this. Some force out there driving us to this kind of stuff.
There is. There definitely is. And on that note, a number of years ago, I met another musician who was dedicated to Padre Pio. Are you familiar with?
Yes, sure.
Very dedicated to Padre Pio, and introduced me to his teachings and whatnot. And it's a long story, but to cut it short, that was the catalyst that prompted me to do research. And I found out that it's my long lost cousin on my father's side, the side that I got my citizenship through, who as a young monk was the personal assistant to Padre Pio and also wrote the 9-day novena.
Wow.
And I brought up a photo. He's still living. He's in his later 80s. He's the head chaplain at Padre Pio's Hospital in San Giovanni Rotondo. And I've connected with him. And then that, through Facebook, which I used as a great tool to reach out to the present time to find existing relatives, because I think that's a really fascinating and important part of genealogy, not digging up the past only, but going into the present and then the future. And I started finding other family members. And then in 2017, I had a long trip in Europe, 3.5 weeks, Austria and Italy, and I got to meet them. It's not the monk, because that was a different part of Italy. I was actually up in Torino, up in the north, only because my southern Italian relatives moved up there as young adults for work. And I got to meet these wonderful people who are my blood. You could see the similarities when you look at each other. Same nose, same eyes. Wow. And that was a very serendipitous happening. Because had I not met that one colleague, musician colleague, I wouldn't have known that much about Padre Pio to prompt the research, which enabled me to find my family.
Yeah, and you mentioned Facebook. I tell everybody the same thing. Start with Facebook. Go to the town, find the last name. I mean, I was lucky on my father's side of the family, Pirmalo, or my grandmother. But it's only one family, so almost everybody on Facebook is from that family. It's not a very common name, and I was able to find a lot of people. And now I'm discovering my father's first cousins, which nobody ever talked about. Never knew. I asked my older cousin, who's about, I guess, 12 or 13 years older than me. He didn't know. Nobody knew these people existed.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, I'm on Facebook with them all the time and
Yep.
all of this stuff. And they're just so wonderful. I can't tell people enough. You have to, if you have that disease that we have, you have to find the people in Italy and meet them, because it's just an unbelievable, incredible experience. So now, you said your grandmother, you used to ask your grandmother stories and stuff. Did she tell you any, fascinating stories that you found to be true or untrue, or led to something else? Or?
Well, yeah, there was this one family mystery that I'm yet to solve. At the end of every story, first of all, she was born and raised in Valle Cilento, in the Cilento region, province of Salerno. And they had a large estate, 250 acres, and large stone house. And she'd always tell me stories about the stone house and how on the first floor, the ground floor, is where the farm animals were kept.
Yeah.
But she would end every story the same way. And she would say, "Shh, we're really Austrian." And I'm like, what? Now that crushed me, because I wanted to be like all the other kids in my Italian American neighborhood, and I just wanted to be Italian. I am yet to find that actual Austrian connection, with the exception that, how did she mean that? Because, by the way, all people of that generation, unfortunately, have passed on, so the information has gotten lost. And in my research, my genealogy research on her lineage, it's all in that Cilento region. But during the 1700s and into the early 1800s, the Austrian Empire ruled from their seat in Naples. So was she referring to that just as, well, my great-grandfather was born under the Austrian flag? I don't know what she meant. German does come up in my DNA testing. So is it from there? I don't know.
And I interviewed Diana Giovanazzi, who wrote a book about the Austrians in Italy and Princess Princess Charlotte, Caroline, but she called herself Charlotte, and that was a fascinating book. It's a historical fiction, but there's so many facts in there about the Austrian Empire, and I didn't know, to your point, that they ruled the north of Italy. I mean, for a long time.
Down into the south.
Eventually into the south. That's right. Yeah, Naples. Right. Yeah, she was in Naples.
Yep.
And it's a great book because she apparently was the brains behind the king of Naples, who didn't really care about being king. He didn't want to be king.
Right.
And she was from the Austrian Empire, so she knew what she was doing. So yeah, it was a really, really cool book. So there's probably some truth to it. I don't remember the stories, but my cousins told me my grandmother used to tell them that her cousin was the princess. And they thought she was just a batty old lady. Well, in fact, her cousin was the princess because her great grandfather was the prince,
Hmm.
and he Prince of Tortorolo and from the Princes of Avellino, and
Hmm.
they never believed her. And then when I told my cousins these, they said, "How did you find this stuff?" I said, it wasn't easy to find it, but
Right.
I always had, which always kind of was in my mind, and I didn't start as early as you. We have the cards from my great grandfather that my grandmother brought from Italy, and it has his name and the crest on it, and it says from the Dukes of Capricota, place behind me. Uh, and I always thought I would find something interesting with him, which I did, but I had no idea who he was married to. And my great grandmother, came from a much more famous family, and they're throughout. I mean, all over, mostly in the South, but all over.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so the lesson there is don't discount the crazy stories because they're probably true.
Right. And always look for hints and
Yes.
follow up on each little hint. And I always look at everything very critically. I never take anything
Yeah,
as
me too.
fact, and nor do I take everything as fiction. I'm always trying to be. You have to be a detective. And just getting back to Facebook a second, in addition to Googling people by surname and location, one thing that's helped me is joining Facebook groups that are generated from the different regions of Italy. For example, I joined a Peschici Facebook group, which is on the Gargano, which is for those who don't know, it's the little peninsula above the heel of the boot jutting out into the Adriatic. And that's where my paternal line is from. And my great grandmother was born in Peschici. So I put up an old photo I had of her, and I described in the body of the text who she was, who her ancestors were. Then all of a sudden, people start contacting me from Peschici. Oh, I think we're related. And we started communicating. And a really cute story was I started communicating with this one particular woman, Giovanna, who believes she is my cousin, and I gave her the lineage. And she now lives in a suburb of Rome. So when I told her, I think our mutual third great grandfather is so and gave his birth and death dates, she then calls her cousin, still living in Peschici, and saying, "Oh, I think we found a relative." And they're like, "Oh my God." And so that relative and that cousin in Peschici goes running out to the cemetery to find the gravesite of our mutual third great grandmother, which she did, which confirmed what I had was true. And now they're like, "We can't wait to see you. When are you coming?" And I'm like, "Oh, my dream is to swim in the Adriatic Sea." They're like, "The whole Fasanella family is going to gather and we're going to take you for your first swim in the Adriatic." Really warm, wonderful, welcoming people. But that was through joining Facebook groups and not being shy about putting up posts about who my ancestors were and say I'm looking for relatives.
Yeah. Now, did they know that they had relatives in the States?
No.
Yeah. See, and they're just as surprised as we are to find them that they found us. And to your point, they love it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a whole new experience for them too. And that's kind of what I found. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we went to some of the towns that were ancestral towns, and I wasn't related to these people per se. I mean, yeah, maybe hundreds of years ago, but I would never find that out. But they were just so marvelous. I mean, they went out of their way. And in this one small town, Montebello, in the hills of Calabria, um, they spent the whole day with us. I
Yeah.
mean, from 10 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, giving us food and entertaining us in a big party outside the house and singing and dancing, uh, and, people say, did they mentioned Florence and they mentioned Venice. And of course, we went to Rome on this trip because we took the kids. They were in their 20s. They had never been to Rome. I said, but that's cultural. That's nice. But you don't feel like you're in, when you meet these people, that's Italy.
Oh yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's completely different, a completely different feeling. So now you did all of this research for years and years and years, and so I'm late to the game in getting my citizenship. and I'm lazier than you, so I have somebody helping me with it. But so, what were your first steps, and how'd you get going with it?
First thing I did was I made an appointment with the consulate for an interview. That was actually step number one, because now just bear in mind that everything is always in a state of change. Things are changing. Even citizenship laws, I think they extended it one more generation. Don't quote me on that. So back in 2015, there was like a 2+ year wait to get your appointment. So it's like, secure that appointment first, which I got one for November of 2018. It's like 2.5 years out. And then within that window of time, acquire all of the documents and translations that I needed. So step one for me was booking the appointment. Step two was getting my long form birth certificate. So that enables me to then get all the subsequent generations' birth, marriage, and death certificates. And I went to the consulate website, found out exactly what documents I needed, made a very detailed list about everything, and I just started sending away from them, because you do it all online.
Yeah, now you can do it all online, right? Yeah.
Right. And then I created folders for each generation, and I just organized everything. I went back to the consulate's website. Oh, by the way, whenever I had a question, and I, being from New Jersey, had worked through the New York City consulate, they were wonderful. I would just email them a question, and they would just send me the reply back. And so that's how I got any of my questions answered. But for the most part, it is pretty straightforward. How are you getting your citizenship, through whom? If so, these are the documents you need. Just get them, get the apostille seals, and basically you're good to go. But to caution all people doing this, make sure everything is in long form. What that means is state issued. Don't get anything from the county, from hospitals. It has to be actual long form, which is, like its name implies, a longer document with additional information. That's the only thing that they'll accept.
Yeah, I heard that. And I have a friend. She actually moved there 3 years ago. She always wanted to live in Italy. Her parents were both born in Italy. And 3 years ago, she got her citizenship, and she did it herself. And she got to the consulate, and there was something wrong with the name. And typically they would make you get, a whole new appointment and everything like that. And she started crying, and the guy told her, come back in 2 weeks and get the information and come back in 2 weeks and we'll fix it. She had but that's the other cautionary thing. Everything has to be just perfect, from what I understand. Yeah.
Absolutely does. Matter of fact, when I was in the waiting room of the consulate, or waiting for my appointment time, I was watching one person after the next coming out of their appointment rooms, because there were quite a few rooms within the consulate where they were interviewing people, dejected. And I would hear them getting on their cell phones. Oh, I've got to come back. I have to get this document, or I didn't have that document. So it has to be, every I has to be dotted, every T has to be crossed correctly, or you will be sent out.
Yeah, and the one attorney that I spoke to over there, who I interviewed, he said now, because of the long waits, that you could petition the court in Italy to get decisions through the court instead of the consulate, because they have a certain amount of time that they're supposed to be able to get back to you, and they can't meet those dates anymore. So that's another option for people in the process. The other thing too is, I don't think everybody knows, is that you could do it quicker without the waits if you want to spend 45 days in Italy, 45 to 60 days, which not necessarily a bad thing if you have the time and the money to be able to do that. So that may be my option. But I just met a cousin, first cousin once removed, who's an attorney in the, I guess they have like an annex consulate in San Diego from Los Angeles. So he said, when the paperwork's done, call me.
Oh, wow. That's great.
So I'm hoping we pull a few strings there, and although I wouldn't be bothered if I had to spend 45 days in Italy.
No. Well, with COVID closing down a lot of the consulates, that bottlenecked them even more. And they were bottlenecked before that happened.
Oh, it's like 4 to 5 years now.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't know if they just recently passed that law that you could petition the court. But that's another option. And another thing that I didn't know about, which may interest some people, is that you could retire in Italy without being a citizen as long as you have enough passive income. So
Okay.
you have to be able to, I think it's 36,000 euros per person or something like that. So as long as you could have a business, not a business, but you can invest a certain amount of money in an Italian business, or you could have passive income, which could be rent or Social Security or
Right.
401k, whatever.
But with that, does that allow you to participate in their healthcare system?
It allows you. I don't think it allows you in the healthcare system. It might. I'd have to go back and listen to the interview.
Yeah.
I think the only thing you can't do is vote. And of course, you're not a citizen of the European Union, so you would still have to travel on your U.S. passport and things like that. But I do, if I remember right, and don't quote me on it, but if I remember right, you are still eligible for certain benefits as part of Italy.
Now, if you petition the court, do you have to have a specific reason, such as already secured a job there, you've bought property? Are there parameters for petitioning the court?
Well, as far as the retiring to Italy, there are requirements as far as there's 3 different things you could do. One is the passive income. The other one is investing in an Italian business. And I forget the third one. There's a third one.
But I'm talking about if you petition the court there.
Oh, for citizenship?
Yeah.
No, I think the only thing that you have to do is prove that you can't get an appointment at the consulate within a certain number of days.
Oh, okay.
So that's based on the consulates not being able to get back to you in time. Because like I said, New York now, I think New York and California are like ridiculous. 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Because
New York
closed.
They were closed, but also New Jersey years ago had a consulate in Newark that permanently shut down. And we have such a dense population of Italian Americans here. And now the Italian consulate in New York City is handling New Jersey. It's handling Connecticut, New York. That includes Staten Island. I mean, they're just bombarded. I mean, the demographic here is so heavily weighted towards Italians, they can't keep up.
Yeah, and I didn't know that. I didn't know there was one in Newark at one time.
Years and years ago. I don't know when it shut down, but it existed, no longer did, and that flooded New York.
Yeah, no, and it must be crazy town in New York to try
but
to get
the consulate's beautiful. If you ever go there on Park Avenue, it's a beautiful building.
I've been past it. I've never went in, but I know I've seen it. Yeah, I have seen it.
The exterior doesn't reflect the ornate interior with the marble staircase. It's beautiful. And the people that work there were just, they were just wonderful. Kind, nice people.
We didn't find one unhappy, nasty person in Italy. Maybe because they get to eat all that pastry and food and stuff like that, and drink all that wine.
And have such good pure food. Because
yes.
A lot of it's homegrown. Now, where my grandmother was from, in Valle Cilento, that's the Cilento region, and that's the birthplace of the Mediterranean diet. And there's one little town near hers that has one of the largest populations of healthy, active centenarians. It's not uncommon to be in your 90s and riding your bike through town.
Wow.
And they're eating a lot of their homegrown foods, which I heard one person say, and I love the quote, "We don't have to say something's organic or not. Here it is all organic because everything is grown without chemicals, without pesticides, which are by definition a neurotoxin." So they're feeding their bodies with the healthiest food possible. They're also out in the sun. They have a strong social structure. And My grandmother lived well into her 90s, and that was dying young in our family. Our family, her older sister passed away at 106.
Wow, yeah. Well, like I said, the my father's cousins that we met, they were in their 90s, spry as could be.
Yep.
Avellino, we were entertained by Liberatore, who 96, and he was playing the accordion like he was 26 and dancing and singing. I was getting tired watching him.
they, I just think for the most part, they live life over there. They enjoy life. They live to enjoy life. They enjoy their meals. Unfortunately, here people are just getting fast food and on the run, throwing the food down. There, eating is an experience,
That's
and
right.
converse. And I really think that plays into one's longevity as well.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And like you said, everything there was fresh. And we were, um, I forget where we were, but somebody had said that I remarked about the fruit stand, the fresh fruit on the street, and they said, well, they don't need refrigerators here
Yeah.
because they sell out the fruit and the next
Mhm.
day they get another shipment. So
Yeah.
they don't need refrigeration for the fruits and the vegetables and stuff like that.
And what's funny about the food, this relates back to my citizenship interview when I finally did have it in 2018. The woman who was interviewing me had just been assigned her consulate position in New York City, and she was from Rome, a native from Rome. And at first she's like, "Okay, give me this document." I had to give her all the documents, and she's doing her stamping of this and putting it into the computer. And then all of a sudden, because people always ask me, "What was your interview like?" Well, I'll tell you, it was about food because after she got done with the technical aspect of things, she just started, I don't know, she just broke into a conversation that she's having a very difficult time eating in New York City and finding really healthy food compared to what she's used to, chemical free food for the most part. And so she was asking me for advice. So my interview was advising my interviewer about where and how to obtain healthy food in the United States.
Yeah, and I'm not a fish person. I mean, I'll eat some shrimp and lobster, but I'm not a fish person. And we were in Sheila, which was just one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. And they had said they set up a fish restaurant. I said, whatever, I'll figure it out. Well, it was amazing. I mean,
Mhm.
it was just incredible. It was like the guy stuck his hand in the water and picked out the fish
Mm.
and cooked it. That's I
Yeah,
mean,
he
didn't
probably did
smell like fish, didn't taste like fish. It was just so good.
because it was fresh.
Because it was fresh. Yeah, yeah. It wasn't coming out of a frozen package or sitting on ice for 3 days or something like that.
Or trucked across the country,
Well,
or
yeah, yeah,
flown from another country. Yeah, it is plucked from the water there.
yeah. I mean, and th- you know, we were there 25 years ago, but we didn't have this. We were in Rome and Sorrento, and we didn't have the same experiences that we had this time. And the olive oil,
Mm.
it's just it tastes like something. It doesn't just. It's not this bland. Ugh.
What about the tomatoes? Because that's
Oh yeah,
right here. I can never find a tomato
that's fresh.
tastes like a tomato in the United States. Even though I buy all organic, we were very organic people, my husband and I, and we try our best that we can. And even with some of the organic tomatoes, they are not. They don't have the flavor because organic, by definition, doesn't mean totally pesticide and chemical free. It means it has to meet a certain limit.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. No, we had uh, in Avellino. We went into they press olive oil, so and
mm,
they have wine, so it was just olive oil and wine, and but they had cherries out there that were just they tasted like cherries, and
wow,
in Montebello they they put out this spread, and everything was made there. The ham was cured there. The cheese was made there.
hmm
The olives were made there, and the one of the grandmas gave us a big thing of olive oil to take home. And the wine was made. I mean, it is just. I could talk about the food in Italy forever. As probably you can too. So.
Yes, I can.
But I think the bottom line for everybody is, if you're planning a trip to Italy, I mean, my advice to people now is, if you're going you don't go for less than 2 weeks or 10 days, but if you want to go to a cultural center like Rome or Venice or a place like that, that's great. But go to the hometown. If you know where the hometown is, go there. You'll see people who look like you. You'll eat the food. I mean, we went to 5 different regions, and the food in every region is different.
Oh yeah.
And in Molise, for example, because we did this grand type of tour thing, he made a meal that the shepherds would eat when they moved the sheep from Molise to Puglia. So it was lentil and potatoes and a pasta with fresh truffles shaved on it, and then like a sheep stew. Again, I'm not a lamb or sheep person, but this was, and it's the way they prepare it with the herbs and cooking it for like 8 hours or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
And it's fresh. And it's fresh.
Yeah, and speaking of the herbs, in Cilento, they grow their own rosemary, a particular variety of rosemary that's native to that area. And there's researchers now from all over the world, and primarily led by PhDs and doctors from Sapienza University in Rome, that are now studying the people of Cilento. And they're thinking that, among other things, one of the contributing factors to their longevity is the rosemary, that particular variety of native rosemary that they use in everything.
Yeah, see? Yeah. I believe it, because like you said before, they're just so vibrant, and living life. Like I said, my father's cousins, two were his first cousins. The other one was married to one of his first cousins. And these women were in their 90s, and they did not look like they were in their 90s.
No.
And they live in Torre del Greco. They're not even out in the mountains someplace,
Yeah. Now, you mentioned one relative an older man playing the accordion like he was in his 20s. Yeah. Did you find other relatives because of being a professional musician, I'm curious, other relatives where music was a big part of their life?
We didn't find relatives per se, but every place we went, there was, they had some sort of music. But when we went to Montebello, there was this great group when we pulled into the town square, because Montebello and Fassato, my third great grandfather was the Baron there. And what amazed me was they still talk about these people as if they're still alive. This family is still ingrained in them. So we pulled into the square, and there was a little folk band, 3 guys, accordions, guitar, type of thing. And as soon as we got out of the car, they were playing Italian folk songs. We had to get out and dance and do all of this stuff. And I posted some of his music. Gino Neri, guy has an amazing voice, and he did that. Then we went into the church, and he sang a song dedicated to the Virgin Mary. And they went to give him a microphone. He said, "I don't need a microphone," and he just filled the church with his voice. Yep. I'll send you the link. I mean, amazing. Yeah. And then he came with us to Fassato, to the other palazzo, and I said to the person who helped us set up the trip, Letizia, I said, "That was great. Everybody was there." And she goes, "Oh, well, the musicians weren't supposed to be in Fassato. They were supposed to leave, but they were having so much fun that they came."
Oh, wow.
And he had us, we were there, and he was singing in the song, "A mangia crappa," which is "eat the goat" in Calabrian. Mm-hmm. And then he had us sing in the chorus, "Mangia crappa, pizzeria, pizzeria." And then he didn't speak English, so we're going back and forth, and he's saying, he wanted me to say like small pieces or something, because that's what pizzeria means in Calabrian. And so I said, well, small bites. Small bites. Then he would go in Italian, or in Calabrian, in English. And we had to say and then and then there was another part. There was another part where he wanted us to sing. It was an old man, so I had to tell him how to say old man in English, and the same thing. He was going back and forth, and they were just so much fun. And because I'm a semi-musician, we had a connection there, and so I'm learning how to play mangiacrappa. So
Oh wow, that's great.
luckily, it's only 3 chords.
Okay. So did you find that a lot of the native folk songs were still part of their active culture?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
What about the kids? What about children? I don't know if there were any
well,
younger
we
people.
we went to in Capicota. They was first communion there. And there's only about 1,000 people in the town, and there's 7 little kids doing first communion, and so they had some music there. But every place we went, like for example, they dressed in costumes from the 16 or 1700s because that was, and there were always at least 2 or 3 young people in their 20s that were dressed in the costume. Same thing in Avellino. Same in Montebello. There was a young man there. Yeah, he's 21, 22. He's studying to be a doctor. And what they did there is they surprised us. My daughter, we couldn't find my daughter. And my wife was like, "Where's Nicole? Where's Nicole?"
Oh, no.
There's no place to go. So well, what they did is they dressed her as the Contessa.
Oh, wow.
And they dressed this young guy dressed as the Baron. And they came out, hand in hand and all that kind of
great.
stuff. So to your point, yeah, they are actively engaged in it. And, one of the things, I'm working with somebody now, Frank DiPiero, who I interviewed a while ago. And what's sad about here is we're losing that connection, especially the young people.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know this. He told me about, it'll be a little bit of a commercial here in our interview, but he told me about this Birthright Israel. They've sent 750,000 people between the ages of 18 and 26 from all around the world since 1999 for their first trip to Israel for free.
Okay.
We don't have anything like that. So,
right.
Frank and I and a couple others, we're going to try and see what we could do because we don't, we'll lose it. Like I said, we're losing that connection back to Italy. The young people aren't aware of this stuff.
Right. They're not. And they're also not aware of Europe in general.
No.
Because as a music teacher, when I teach primarily piano. That's my primary instrument. And I have wonderful, wonderful students between the ages of, 5 through 75. And when I'm teaching them to play a piece, I like to teach them about the history of the piece. Yeah. So, for example, if I'm teaching them a piece by Bach, oh, where is Bach from? They have no idea. And then I tell them, about, Bach was born in Germany and give them some biographical sketch rather on him. But oddly, I've had Italian kids who, if they're I'm talking about Puccini or Verdi or whomever, they don't even know what the outline of Italy looks like. And they're 10 and 11 years old. And if I'm talking about an Austrian composer, Mozart, Austria, forget it. They have no clue. Now, I had, I think he was 12. Nice kid, smart kid, good kids. But they're not being taught this in the schools. And I'll say, okay, where do you think Austria is? And I always get the same answer. Asia.
Really? Oh,
yeah. And so then I started talking to the parents and to the kids, and I've learned, at least in our area of Northern Bergen County, the schools are not teaching geography or world history until they're in high school. So that gives them a very myopic, narrow view of the world, and it doesn't give them the thirst and the curiosity to explore and learn about other cultures, which I think is a very important thing. And I'm trying to teach that through music, and it's hard when they don't even know what Europe is. I had an 5th grader not know what a country was. And there's no fault of the kid, good kid. And he was like, wait, what's a country? What's a state?
That's terrible. I mean, well, our kids are 26 and 27 and 25 now, but they same thing in Florida. In Florida they were teaching them to pass the standard test.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
we had to teach them how to sign their name. To your point, I mean, that's one thing that we found, and we came back and said the Italian people, first, they love their culture, they love their history, and they keep it there. I mean, every place we went, and you're not walking down the street, but there were still people who dressed in the costumes of that region,
Hmm.
or play the music of that region, and young people, young people who dress in the costume of somebody from 1600 or something like that, because it's important to them. And I'm sure there's young people here too who dress in the Revolutionary War costumes and are involved in that kind of stuff. But there, it's almost like it's a part of their life.
Well, you said something very interesting. You said here maybe they dress in Revolutionary War costumes.
Yes, that's a good point.
Whereas there, they're glorifying more of their historic
That's
culture,
right, their culture.
arts and the culture, not just a war.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a very good point.
And that's what. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just saying what we need here, which is what we try to do through as music teachers and owning a music school, is try to we're not just teaching you how to hold a guitar and play a guitar. Or, okay, play this little Mozart piece. Learn about Mozart. Where is he from? Beethoven, for example, born in Germany, but when he was in his 20s, moved to Austria. Not Australia with kangaroos, but Austria, not in Asia. But why? Because that's where that was the music capital of the world for classical music. So he wanted to be influenced by his predecessors and his contemporaries that were there. So we try to teach, especially I try to teach world culture and history through music. And that's important because it teaches respect for other cultures and unity as human beings.
Yeah, no, I agree. And my kids are adopted, so my daughter comes from a long line of people who have from like the 1600s came into Virginia or Boston or wherever.
Oh, wow.
And I traced her back. I was able to trace her back to England.
Oh,
And
cool.
she descends from one of the Bassano brothers. So I don't know, do you know the Bassano brothers? Do you know who they are?
I don't think so.
They were three musicians from Venice or Florence. But anyway, three Italian musicians.
How do you spell that name?
Bassano, I think it is.
Bassano, okay.
Bassano. I think it was three brothers. They were court musicians for Henry VIII.
Oh, wow. How cool is that?
So they wound up marrying English women, of course, and, having families there. And it was amazing because through it was a birth father, through his family, I traced it back to England, back to one of the Bassano brothers in the court of Henry VIII. So don't give up. I always tell people, don't give up. You'll find the most interesting things. And sometimes you need to walk away for a while.
Yeah.
And come back. And when you come back, you're going to find something that's going to just, oh boy, how did I miss that?
Yeah, well, you look at it with new, fresh eyes, and that's what happened to me. How did I miss that? My grandfather was a citizen of Italy on that census report. For years, I've seen that paper, but I never gave it any regard. It was a tiny little paper that I kept in that big binder that have all those plastic page protectors. Everything's in a sleeve, nice and neat. But I would just flip by it. Oh, yeah, my grandfather, he came to the United States and he naturalized right away. No, it didn't work that way.
I don't have patience with a lot of things, but I have patience with this. My wife always says, "Are you looking for dead relatives again?" I said, "Yeah, I'm afraid I am." Well, this has been great fun. I really appreciate it, and good to get everybody's insight on these things, because I feel that every time I do one of these, and somebody listens to it, is either looking for citizenship or wanting to know Italian history, or just doing their own research, that there's something for them to find.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, hopefully I've given people some hints and clues that they can follow up on and make discoveries on their own.
I think absolutely, absolutely. All right, thanks again.
Thank you.